Well, welcome back. I hope you were well. Today will mark what I think would be a concluding part of what we've been talking about for the past 10 days. It's a Friday, TGIF, and I thought perhaps it's important that we transition. It's important that I transition from the questions that I have been asking to help you understand yourself and critique your relationships. It is important that I transition into solutions. Anyone can ask questions, and it wouldn't be unusual for those who have been with me over the past 9 sessions to say, I understand now. You've shown me a part of my life through the questions that you have asked, and I see. But I have a limited vision still, so I need someone to guide me past, you might say, the wilderness, and not handhold me, but guide me on the path towards the promised land. So in today's session, I'm going to talk about briefly what the next theme would be. What we have talked about over 10 sessions is what I call the cause effect of relationships. And I've tried using several, as much as I could, drawing on several ideas to give you an understanding, to increase your awareness of how your relationship has been a cause-effect blueprint of certain things that were done to you, certain things that were done for you, and certain things that you have done to yourself. I would ask you in today's session 4 questions. Those 4 questions will help me bring today's session and the last 10 sessions to a conclusion. The answers to the questions will position you as to whether you want to be a student for the next session. But it might also prompt you to, I guess, get some clarity on what your preferences are with regards to relationships. Now, you've heard me say throughout these sessions that choices that we make always come with constraints. They come with costs and therefore consequences. And finally, trade-offs. That when we make choices, we are always trading something for another thing. Just having that understanding means that whilst you might be quite young and therefore unfocused on relationships, recognize that it doesn't mean that in the future you may not change your mind. So here are the 4 questions for today's session before I set the theme for the future. Number 1, do you believe that men are a necessity for having a fulfilled and a happy life? Do you think that men are a necessity, in other words, mandatory for a successful, happy, fulfilling life? That's the first. The second, do you believe and think that you can live without a man? In other words, you can go through life and can find happiness and can find your fulfillment and even your purpose and have a purposeful life and be content throughout your life without a man. And number 3 is, do you find the idea of studying men or studying what men want or connecting with the archetype of men, a masculine frame, and seeing men as something to be studied and to gather more knowledge about? Do you find that concept to be unacceptable or somehow irritating? The three questions. Your very first instinct. Go with whatever comes to your heart. And let me just say this. There is no right or wrong, because it's your life, it's your choices. So don't feel in a particular way if you were to lean towards no as your answers for all three questions. So you might say, well, men are not a necessity in my life. Number two, I can live without a man. Number three, I don't think I should study men. Those might be your answers. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with those answers. Why? They are your choices. But remember what I said, choices come with costs, constraints, consequences, and therefore trade-offs. You're trading something for another. Now, the fourth question is, are you happy with your choices, and are you willing to change anything? Now, those who perhaps may have said that their natural instinct is to say, I don't think men are a necessity. I don't think my life will be less colorful if I didn't have a man, so therefore I don't really need a man in my life. I can have a good life without a man, and I don't need to study men. I have other priorities. I want to focus on myself. If those were your solutions or your answers, the fourth question is to say, will you change anything? In the sessions to follow from next week, I will start to give you some simple ideas from my lived experience, from my study, from my observations. I'm a much older man, and therefore I can draw on a lot of experiences. Now, let me say something perhaps which I think is necessary. I have been teaching in several ways since for the past few decades. I have also considered myself as a teacher, because I have found that in my life, the knowledge that other people poured into me was what made me, I think, change pivotal or get to pivotal moments and make better decisions. I never really appreciated at the time the pouring into my life. But in hindsight, I can see that had that person or those people not come into my life at that time, I could have had a different experience. And I always decided that it's almost a moral duty to pour into other people. However, in this day and age, we have social media, and we have different infrastructures and different platforms, and one has to be careful, because what we have is, in many ways, a non-curated sharing of knowledge. And most people are learning from the people who have never really lived. I'm quite surprised at what I see of late, but amongst younger men and younger women who do not read and who have not read books for years. I met a few people this week, and I asked a very simple question to one of the men I met. I said, do you read? And he said, no. I said, when was the last time you read a book? And he says, I don't read. I do my assignments, if I have to, for college, but I don't read books. I said, how do you find education or entertainment? And he said, TikTok, YouTube, and other platforms. But his primary learning platform was TikTok. And when I dived deep into who he was learning from, these were young people teaching other young people about life. There is something that is to be said about the quality of the knowledge you get. I'm not suggesting that my experience is more superior, but I'm saying the wisdom of the older people can be used as a useful mirror against what you might be getting from your peer group. And it's never, it should never be frowned upon, which is why it should never be frowned upon when you seek alternative source of knowledge or information. You might be a woman. There's nothing wrong in listening to what a man has to say about relationships or about women. Be objective. Welcome the information. I always say, don't accept what you hear. Don't reject what you hear, and do not neglect what you hear. A wise person takes the information, sits down and asks himself or herself a simple question. Can this information and will this information help me achieve my goals and dreams? If the answer is yes, then it doesn't matter the source. What matters is the content. You take the content and you apply it for optimal results in your life, which is what I suggest. It's important to look beyond, which is partly why I should say this. I'm also stunned at how little people go to their parents for advice. I speak to young women, I speak to young men, and in probably 90% of the time, they don't speak to their parents about dating, about relationships, about their problems. They go back to their peer group. These are teenagers, young people, who haven't really had any experience in life. And so what you have is a regurgitation of what I call the unlived experience, and using formulas that have not really stood the test of time. One of the things I learned about life was that irrespective of the area of life, that there are usually only about a half a dozen, sometimes up to 10, core principles that can enable you to have a successful life. Whether you're looking for happiness or wealth or health, prosperity, whether you're looking for business associates, there are about half a dozen to about 10 principles that if you apply will make your life easy. And those principles apply across boundaries. So what you might find is that the principles of success can be applied to the principles of wealth, could be applied to the principles of happiness, could be applied to the principles of forgiveness. One thing I learned was that the common denominator was the word study. In other words, if you want to be successful, study success. If you want to be wealthy, study wealth. If you want to have a good relationship, study those who have either had a good relationship and are thriving, or study those who have had poor relationships and learn from their experiences. In any case, let me, considering the 4 questions I asked, let me leave you with the following as almost like something to sit in your hearts as we move into solutions from next week. In summary, for what we've discussed over the past 10 sessions, I had talked about the cause-effect relationships, and how our mind is like the soil, is like a garden. We plant seeds into our mind. Those seeds, at some point, all seeds have a gestation period, and at some point, it will bring forth fruit. The same soil will produce weeds, and the same soil will produce good crop. You have to remove the weeds and nurture the good crop. And you have seasons. And therefore, what you do in the seasons makes a huge impact on the quality of the crop or the quality of the harvest you get. So let me bring together everything that I've shared so far. At the core of the last 10 sessions, I was trying to show you that each and every one of us has a self-image of what relationships should look like. And the outcomes we experience is a product of that self-concept, that self-image. But fundamentally what you find is that those who have relational issues, and this applies to so many people, at the top, it comes down to ignorance. Now, let me say something. Ignorance is not knowing something. It's having a lack of knowledge about something. I am ignorant. We are all ignorant in some areas of life. In some other areas, we are very knowledgeable. But ignorance is effectively the opposite side and the negative side of a fruitful, successful relationship. On the opposite side is knowledge. Now, let me explain how all of this comes together and what I will be doing in the next sessions. Ignorance, unfortunately, leads. Think about this. If you're ignorant about something, then as a natural way of protecting yourself, you might find that your intellectual state, your thinking mind, because you don't have the information, you develop doubt and worry. The doubt and worry is simply because there's something you do not know. The doubt and worry effectively is part of the cause. The cause is ignorance. It translates into doubt and worry, which is also a cause that has to translate into an effect. Doubt and worry with regards to relationships will always lead to fear. Think about the relationships that you may have had. There have been times when you felt uncertain. There have been times where you felt as though perhaps things were not moving the way it should. There were times when perhaps you felt that certain information was being kept away from you. It simply means there was knowledge you did not have, or information that you did not have. You were ignorant. That caused, or that led to doubt and worry. And unfortunately, that caused fear. Fear is a negative emotion. Fear, therefore, the way the human body works. I said at the early stages that we are very special individuals. We are spiritual beings. We live in a physical body. We have an intellect. Because we have a physical body, and because we live in a physical world, the emotion of fear has to go through our body. Fear has to be, unfortunately, this is perhaps where most people have had challenges in their relationships. Whenever you have fear, the natural effect is anxiety. You're anxious about something. You're anxious because you don't know. You're anxious because you're fearful. You're fearful because you're worried. You're worried because you doubt. You're doubtful because you don't have information and you're ignorant. Anxiety in the human body must do one of two things. It has to be expressed or it has to be suppressed. It can only do one of two things. The negative emotion of anxiety leans towards repression or suppression. So what you find is those who have anxiety in relationships or about relationships suppress how they feel. They double down. That suppression of the negative feeling of fear, unfortunately causes most people to almost be in a state of depression about relationships. There are so many people who have never found happiness. Why? Ignorance, doubt and worry, leading to fear, leading to anxiety. So when you meet someone, even before the first date, you're anxious. Even after the first date, in your mind, you're looking for all the reasons why things will not go well. That causes you to act in a certain way through your body. You, sadly speaking, most people don't share how they feel, so we suppress. You see, fear would always lead to suppression, except you speak about it openly. But most people find it easier to hold their emotions close to their hearts. So we suppress the anxiety. It leads to a state of relational depression. that relational depression, if allowed to persist, will cause what we call the dissolution of the relationship. That will cause a breakdown we call disease. And therefore, both parties walk in separate ways. And one person saying, well, I don't need men, or I don't need women. I'm fine just by myself. There are no good men and there are no good women. No, there are great men out there and there are great women out there. You just lack the wisdom to know how to get along, coexist with the opposite sex. For those who want to transition, which is why I asked the fourth question, will you and are you willing to do anything differently? In the next week, or in the next session that follows, I'm going to start providing you with information. At the top, on one side, you have ignorance. The opposite, the polar opposite, which is a positive rather than a negative, is knowledge. So if you're listening to, and if you have been listening to the past 10 sessions, you're gaining knowledge. But you're gaining knowledge in a funny way. You're gaining knowledge by acquiring information. But what we're trying to do is not just give you knowledge. What I'm hoping to do in this section is give you understanding. Understanding only comes if you study what is being shared. You have to study information. The study of information allows you to develop knowledge. Through the process of repetition, spaced repetition, you will get comprehension. That comprehension will grant you understanding so that you can say, do you know what? I understand men. Hence the question, are you willing to study men? Which is my question number 3. Are you willing to study men? You see, if you have understanding, what you do is you change and you increase or raise your awareness about relationships and how relationships can be successful. Let me go back. The knowledge comes through study. You're studying information about relationships, about the opposite sex. That study allows you to have understanding, which enables you to have an awareness that you once did not have. That awareness is an awareness about men, about how we think, our fears, our dreams, our hopes, our concerns. It helps you understand. You study yourself, your dreams, your hopes, your concerns. Now here is where we have a separation between the two opposites. Ignorance leads to doubt and worry. Knowledge that is studied leads to awareness and understanding. Understanding and an increased level of awareness creates faith. So rather than have fear, you have faith. You see, the opposite of fear is faith. Faith is simply the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. It's a belief. The belief does not come simply because you've seen the end. The belief often comes because you have an understanding of what is possible. And therefore, you believe that the end will be positive. We are all controlled by our belief system. We are enslaved by our belief system. Our relationships are a picture of our belief system. If you have faith, faith is a cause. Faith has to translate through the body as an effect. And what you find is the people who have faith tend to be well. They have well-being. So rather than have anxiety, those who know and have studied and have learned have well-being. Well-being has to manifest through the body the same way anxiety manifests through the body, through suppression. Well-being has to be expressed. Think about the friends that you have or the people you know who have great relationships, who have been married for a long number of years or for decades, people who have been dating and are very happy. There is a sense of a well-being that they have. They're very light. They're not heavy. They're not heavy because they're expressing their joy, they are expressing, and they're sending out the energy of positive love and the energy of grace and the energy of togetherness, as opposed to those who have anxiety and who are suppressing all of their emotions. Well-being is expressed. And what you find is, rather than have being depressed, those who have well-being and are expressing themselves move into what we call an accelerated state. They're accelerating. They're not being pulled back and suppressing themselves. They're accelerating. Life seems easy. Relationships, though they might have challenges, they're not stuck. They're not waiting. They're not wasting their precious years. They're with people they love. They're developing as people. They're growing together. They're moving in a positive direction towards the goals that they want, whatever those goals may be. And what you find is that acceleration, a key thing, causes them to be at ease. Those who have relational difficulties, who are suppressed emotionally, who are relationally depressed, always tend to have some form of a disease in their relationship, where you jump from one relationship to the other, because diseases, if it's not cared for, leads to death. So one relationship dies, and then you start another one, and another dies, and then you start another one, and another dies, and you're wondering, why can't I seem to make it work? Well, part of the reason is because you're not at ease. You see, those at ease have well-being, and therefore they have a successful life, they have happiness, they have fulfillment. And make no mistake, they also have challenges. But they do something that is important. They keep learning. You see, the great writer says, faith comes by hearing. Faith comes by what you hear. Faith leaves by what you hear. Doubt and worry comes by what you hear. Doubt and worry leaves by what you hear. The question is, what is feeding into your self-identity and image about relationships? And in the previous sessions, the 10 sessions, I was trying to illustrate that for many of us, we have already been conditioned through our parents, through our parents' parents, through our environment, through our social network. We have been conditioned, and therefore the ideas that have created the ignorance sometimes is at a subconscious level. And what you need to do, if you want success, is to study, because through the process of study, you start to displace old ideas with better ideas. We call it the law of displacement. Now think about this space that I am speaking to you from is well lit. Now in the same space is darkness. You just cannot see it. If I were to flick the switch, suddenly light leaves and the darkness that was here and has always been here presents itself. The way you get one idea out of your system is to focus on a new idea and have the new idea displace the old idea. So in the sessions to follow, I am going to start giving you ideas that I would hope will begin to find its way into your conscious state and hopefully transition into your subconscious state and start to help you make better decisions. Most of us, myself included, we were not trained, we were not taught about relationships. But it's important to be taught and to be trained about relationships rather than to go through life by trial and error. There are two ways of learning: through your experiences, and you can also learn through other people's experiences. The best way of learning is by combining both. You live vicariously through other people's lived lives so that you do not make the same mistake through the investment of your time and all of your resources. You cannot always learn through your experiences. It's a painful way and the most expensive way of learning. If you do relationships by trial and error, sometimes you might be burned so badly that it causes panic attacks whenever you come into a new relationship and then you sabotage yourself. The sessions that follow, we are going to talk about so many ideas. Now, whether you're 16 or 15 and have just started dating, or whether you're in your mid-30s, still a young woman, and are running out of time, or whether you are in your 40s and have not found, or have found previously the love of your life, but for whatever reason, you find yourself back in the dating marketplace. I am going to provide some solutions and some ideas. I think it will be fun. It may not apply to everyone. There will be broad generalizations about certain topics. It may not apply to your anecdotal experience, but I would suggest that you take the information and let it sit there. Put the information on the shelf if you cannot use it immediately, because who knows? You might need it, not for you in the future, but for someone else. To be available and to be capable, and to be capable is one of the hallmarks of being a complete person. The fact that somebody can call you and say, I have a problem, and you say, hold on, I have this information on my shelf, I haven't used it, but it seems really good. You're available for them when they need you, and you're capable of helping them when they need you. Now, I hope you are as excited as I am about the sessions that will follow. Eat the meat, spit out the bones. Don't get hung up with the delivery. Do not get hung up with the lack of excitement. This is not a comedy show. I'll try to make it as entertaining as I can. Do not get hung up with perhaps the vessel that is being used to convey the message. If the vessel is too much to take in, I would say shut your eyes and listen to the residents speak. Now, I hope all of this has been useful, and I certainly look forward to seeing you in the next session.